4-8-22-13. If there is one thing I have learned of late, it's that looks can be deceiving, even more so than the disingenuous nature of many nobles I encountered in Katagia. For the Jungle of Zaal hides many secrets, of which I will now share a few. Upon entering the jungle, we assumed our barbarian friend Fenris would be able to easily track the movements of our quarry, the slaver Ula along with her guard and dozens of slaves. But apparently this proved too much of a challenge for the monosyllabic Dari, getting us hopelessly lost on more than one occasion. But through this misstep, we found one of the jungle's most mysterious denizens. In a clearing lay a hut, unmistakably lit by magical means. It was guarded by a large monstrosity, the face of a bull, but standing on two legs, a minotaur. Soon, an incredibly old green-skinned woman appeared from within. I have only read stories of witches and hags such as her, and knew not to call her by such titles. Fenris shed no such scruples, greeting her bluntly as Forest Hag. The witch was not fazed by this, instead requesting payment in exchange for her knowledge. Being no stranger to haggling, I led the way, offering the severed head of one of the mutated rats we had encountered back in Quodeth. She was surprisingly happy to receive it. The others made similar offerings, and in exchange we were pointed in the correct direction to find the lost slaves, whilst also being warned of many dangers within the jungle. A curious and powerful one, this witch, but whether for good or ill, I have yet to decide. With our new bearing, we soon find a lone slave, escaped from the group. Apparently, the group was attacked by degenerates, beast men who inhabit this area. Clearly terrified and more of a liability than a help going forward, we agreed to come back for him. Using one of my newly acquired gifts, prestidigitation, I cleaned him up with a wave of my hand and lended him one of my hand axes should the worst happen. I may have neglected to mention that the hand axe I lent was a weapon I had magically bonded with and could summon back to my hand at a moment's notice, if the worst should happen. Pressing forward, we find our quarry, the slaver Ula, surrounded by degenerates. Soon we have saved her life, though the life of a slaver is hardly noteworthy. I must confess, she was much more apt in the battle than a proud Atlantean noble would ever care to admit, and I wasted no time stamping my authority on her. She seemed to think that we had been sent to assist her by the Seven Knives, a guise which we decided to play along with. We followed her towards a ziggurat, perhaps the same one that houses the fabled Eye of Meng, an artifact of incredible power. Passing huge stone heads of one-horned cyclops on the way, the heads alone being twice as tall as our giant king assassin, the frost giant's son. Fending off an attack by giant spiders, with only Fenris being poisoned by their venom, we soon find the slaves and guards, held in a pen at the base of the ziggurat. Their captors soon dragged out a beautiful slave girl, naked as the day she was born, with the intention of eating her. This was too much for the impetuous Vorstag, who has developed quite a taste for quick kills, sneaking up and assassinating two before we can get into the fray. As a second group behind the ziggurat rush in to join, Cassandra showed her magical prowess once again, blasting most with a thunder wave, before Ula and myself finished the rest. In the chaos, a cowardly guard made a break for the ziggurat, jumping inside its entrance. We soon followed, bringing everyone inside to make camp, as we heard more degenerates approach. The main chamber of the ziggurat was gloomy and ancient, with several corridors and entrances around, and a vast shaft at its center, perhaps 100 feet down, with an immense serpent holding a glowing emerald in its jaws. Surely the Eye of Meng itself. But by Kishtar, the smell of rotting flesh from below was intolerable. As we camped, we learned more about Ula. It appears we had been led under false pretenses. Ula may have been a slaver, but she was also a debtor. She owed the 7 Knives 5,000 gold, a hefty price, and they had taken her girlfriend Rien as hostage until she repaid the debt. They even removed one of their charge's fingers. I did not feel sympathy for Ula. There are many other ways to raise capital besides human trafficking. But Rien was innocent. We will see what can be done about this. It was during this brief respite that my companions also surprised me. Aishma used the time to equip her new armor, a fine bronze cuirass with a phoenix motif embossed on it. Better even than my Atlantean mail, though I'd never admit that. Fenris started reading one of my scrolls of Quidethi history, and Vorstag negotiated with Ula to release Fionn, the slave girl he had saved. Ula agreed, provided, of course, that we got her and her slaves safely to Gia. Once fresh, we explored through the door nearest the main chamber, a room filled with 9 mahogany sarcophagi, splendidly adorned and displayed. They were larger than your average human, perhaps 10 feet long. Aishmer and I opened one and found an abominable sight. A humanoid with grotesque, elongated features, tentacles, and an extra mouth. Aishmer remarked that this was the work of the Old Ones and must be destroyed. She and Vostag set to work, overturning the coffins in a domino-like effect, but soon we heard a banging from within. I ran over to the nearest one, just in case it was an innocent trapped inside. What I saw brings me fear even now. A mutilated corpse, like the last, but this one fixed me with a hideous, inhuman stare, and I felt my body momentarily freeze as it took hold of my very soul. With Asura's fire burning within me, I willed myself free of the stare and set to work with my moonblade, gleaming even more brightly than before. Within moments, we had slayed the 3 reanimated corpses. It would appear those undead were resistant to most weapons, but not my magical scimitar. Being of a noble house does have its perks. But I was not alone. Aishma has a strange power of her own, and the once greenish glow of her scimitars turned to a white-gold blaze that equally damaged the foe. Intriguing. It seemed that many things were not as they seemed in the tunnels. We found various traps, some magical and some not. One was a spike trap, negated by the Corsair's ingenious use of the mahogany coffin lids. Another was an abjuration, activated when I stepped on a glyph. Before I could cry out, I became entirely encased in a purple amber, unable to move. Vorstag freed me in the most rudimentary way his mind could comprehend, grabbing my amber form and attempting to crack it open like an egg. Several thrashes later, I was free, but very battered and bruised by the overzealous giantkin. There was also a poison gas trap, set off by the hapless Fenris on a pressure plate. The noxious gas was too much for the frost giant's son, who succumbed to the toxic fumes, knocking him out and forcing Fenris to drag him back into the main chamber, and I to hesitantly use one of my only health potions to revive him. Vorstag was surprisingly gracious, or perhaps relieved, offering us both gold for our efforts. I gladly accepted the reimbursement, but the Dari was too proud, and so the Giant King elected to slip the gold into Fenris's pack when the barbarian wasn't looking. But with risk comes reward. As well as Aishma finding clay pots full of human organs, we gathered much treasure. Ula was keen for us to share the spoils with her, despite no input in the finding, and I made my thoughts on the matter clear, though later, privately, Aishma reminded me that Ula's share will also be ours, once we take her back to the 7 Knives. But the best was yet to come. Back in the poisoned corridor, where the spike trap also was, Aishma then spotted another hidden door to the right of us. On entering, we found another chamber, smaller and more intricately decorated than the last, with a large stone sarcophagus in the center. The room was painted to resemble a starry night, with roaring flames painted by the opposite corridor further in. Vorstag assumed this belonged to a vampire. Ha! How little he knows. Using our crowbars, we levered open the coffin to find another mummified grotesque cadaver, this one clutching a glittering translucent cube that appeared to be containing a swirling mist. The cube of Meng, a rare find indeed. We hatched a plan to take it and be ready in case the corpse animated like those from earlier. With Vorstag ready with his blades over the head, and Aishma set to take the prize, I placed myself between the pair. I knew those two could not be trusted with such a rare artifact. The power contained within it was plain to see. They chose to take it on the count of 3. I snatched it on 2. The Defier strikes again. It will take some time to master this new toy. Where the flames were painted, I also sensed magic, quite possibly a magical trap, and warned the others not to proceed. Continuing on, we found 3 more chambers. I also found time to attune to the cube of Meng, learning that the cube emits a force field, a barrier that, depending on what side of the cube was pressed, will stop certain materials passing through it, even magical effects. This will prove useful. Inspecting the room of spiked corpses, it appeared to be a dead end, so Aishmer and Fenris decided to search it, the latter finding a secret door, and the former finding an ornately designed and powerful magical scimitar to rival even my moonblade. Jealous doesn't even come close. We guess that the secret door leads back to the flame trap corridor where we found the cube, but I have to be sure. Surely there is another way down to the Eye of Meng than just the 100-foot drop. I pulled out the cube and summoned the barrier from it. Unfortunately, the perimeter appeared outside of the corridor's walls and floor, meaning any fire effects summoned through the walls would still damage me, like meat roasting in an oven. But I still needed to have no stone unturned. Walking down the corridor confirms my suspicions on both counts. It did lead to the cube's sarcophagus, and it was trapped. Suddenly, a massive, fiery explosion engulfed both myself and the ends of the corridor. Somehow, I walked out of it alive, but the blast knocked our giant king unconscious again. Apparently, they're more fragile than they look. Fenris looked as bad as I did, but Aishma somehow avoided most of the damage. Appearing at just the right moment, Ula lost her patience, deciding to order her guards to descend into the pit to retrieve the Eye of Meng. It would prove a fatal mistake. With none of our party in shape to help, Aishma suspected something was about to go very, very wrong. She called on Mithra, now seemingly a patron of hers, to heal Vorstag, before ushering us back into the sarcophagi chamber with Cassandra and the slaves. Once inside, we heard a blood-curdling scream, cut short by the snapping of bones. We peeked through the door long enough to see a most terrifying sight. A huge, snake-like creature with several legs and a wide maw. Sometimes, discretion is the better part of valor, and though I am not proud to admit it, we survived through our own cowardice. There are some odds that even Zérda the Defier cannot beat. We barricaded the door, and could only listen to the guards being devoured or struck by lightning. Apparently the beast could emit lightning as well. We heard Ula turn and run for the exit, but even she could not withstand the beast. One last struggle, and she too was swallowed by the beast, armor and all. The 7 Knives will not be pleased, but to nurgle with them. When we had heard the beast had left to hunt down degenerates outside, we made our move, lowering Aishmer into the hole via ropes, with 2 of the strongest-looking slaves, myself and Fenris, taking the strain, while Vorstag kept watch at the entrance. She retrieved the eye before we led the slaves into the jungle, away from the beast. Passing the giant stone heads on our way out, we were treated to another surprise. The stone heads are that of giant colossi designed to protect the eye. They erupted from the ground, but were slow to move, giving all of us time to put leagues between us and them. We ran all night. When it seemed that the colossi would not stop their pursuit, Aishma decided to hide the eye up a tree, giving us all time to rest and hide away from their relentless hunt. But even that rest was cut short, with an angry half-man, half-boar appearing. Eventually, some distance away, we heard the colossi turn and leave, apparently having found their prize. This calmed the boar-man also, who disappeared back into the jungle. It took 2 days for us to find our way out of the jungle, slaves in tow. But sadly, we did not find the one with my hand axe. As we boarded the barge back to Quodeth, away from the others, I summoned the hand axe back to my grasp. But it is not all bad news. We have decided to free the slaves when we arrive back in the city. Many were keen to work as servants for me, but I can only afford a few. Still, that will expand my retinue threefold. I have employed a Kalayan girl from Rensha named Saya, a couple of years my junior, who not only can read and write, but is talented and beautiful to boot. I have promised to buy her a lute when we reach the city. A minstrel will no doubt raise my status around the city, or perhaps even to flatter and carry favor with certain nobles. I also employed the 2 strong slaves who helped us retrieve the eye. One a young Nemothan named Thagnar, and the other a teenage Dari named Arn. I'm sure all will prove their worth in time. Appearances can most certainly be deceiving, particularly where magic is concerned. I have been pondering a new spell, one which will be most useful in maintaining my anonymity. Disguising myself as another will allow me to carry out whatever acts are necessary in the city, without risking Zérda of House Saväschu's reputation. And seeing how much damage fire can do, perhaps there is another spell I can learn on the journey back. It may be best to have an insurance policy, in case the 7 Knives don't take kindly to our news.